Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning into my podcast, Reflecting with Ron. I am your host, Ron Bagnera. This is episode 8. Tonight I'll be joined by my good high school friend, Amanda. Let us dive into some deep reflecting. We will reflect upon anything from accomplishments, challenges that were overcome, revisit memories of the past, life experiences, or anything that you were deliberating or pondering about life. How are you doing today, Amanda?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Ron. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm delighted, as always, to have you on this particular episode. I know we've had, scheduling issues and conflicts, but now that we're finally here, I'm excited and delighted. And what will we be talking about tonight?
I thought it'd be interesting to talk about whether or not you can be friends with an ex.
That's a really good subject to explore. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it. So how would you like to go about that?
Well, first I wanted to get your perspective, since I know some of your exes and you know some of mine, and just see where our thoughts differ.
That sounds wonderful. Me personally, I feel it depends on the circumstances of the breakup and what brought it to that point, and how you feel yourself personally and your current partner feels pertaining to it, whether it was, amicable, if it was, violent and domestic, if it just, it just was all together messed up. So I haven't had that opportunity to really be friends with my exes. They tend to, just kind of clean cut and call it a day, and then they kind of just, block me out of their life entirely. So I think for me personally, it works just to, cut the ties and not bring anything that may bring up, past feelings or stories, stuff like that. Like, yeah, I know I sometimes will refer to an ex or a specific time in my life, but, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm just saying it in a way to just, make my significant other feel bad or anything else, or that I enjoyed the time with them as opposed to my current partner, So I don't know. I know some people, like, they were in committed relationships for, X amount of years, and that they're totally cool and established with their friend groups, but, to each their own. So how do you feel personally when it comes to that question? Can you be friends with your exes?
I agree with you that it really depends on how the relationship ended, and I wouldn't necessarily say are friends with some of my exes, but we're definitely on civil terms, and it took a while to get to that place, willingness to move on from the past. But I also know that other people really struggle with that. I know personally for myself, being in a semi-new relationship, it's important for me to not bring my exes into my current relationship and vice versa. I think when you start a new relationship, there are sometimes exes who want to reconnect or stay part of your life, and really looking at what those intentions are. I know for myself, I have issues if the person I'm dating is friends with an ex, if I know that that ex may have intentions of trying to get my partner back. And I think that's something that is normal and to be expected. I'm definitely not a jealous person, but I'm definitely very intuitive, and I know how people are, and I know people can be sneaky. As far as the people that I'm friends with who are my exes, or at least people who I'm still civil with, it took some time, but I definitely don't hang out with them. We don't spend hours on the phone together. It's more of a Facebook, hey, how you doing? Or we're friends on Snapchat, or I like their photo. But it's definitely not we don't go out on double dates. We don't hang out like that. But I think it's definitely okay to have a civil relationship, unless experiences I've had in the past are I'll date someone and they'll be oh, I'm really close friends with my ex, they're in the same friend group as me, I see them all the time, and it definitely made me feel uncomfortable if I'm hanging out with my partner and their ex-girlfriend is there eyeing at me across the bar with dagger eyes. Definitely not comfortable with that. But if they just check in every once in a while, or they had a shared pet or something, that I'm cool with. But I'm definitely not cool with hanging out with your ex. I just don't see, unless you have a kid or something, I feel that's the only exception.
I agree with that entirely. And just like how you mentioned with friend groups, like that can get really messy, especially when like you guys have a lot of mutual friends and it might have not ended on good terms, and then your friends decide to pick sides and it just gets ugly. And in those cases, I feel like definitely you don't want to befriend them, obviously, because they obviously have, ill intentions and they're not looking for your best interests at heart. And more times than not, they might even be attempting to sabotage your current relationship. And obviously, that's when, the cat claws come out and you go, wow,
I definitely feel like it can also lead to a lot of fights in relationships, especially if you see your partner texting their ex and you may or may not know what the context of that conversation is. I've definitely been in that position before. And I also don't think, in my own opinion, you should ever be friends with someone who was abusive towards you or cheated on you. Like, if they treated you poorly in a romantic relationship, what makes you think they're going to treat you better as a friend?
Exactly. Like, how it all starts out, you almost start off as friends, but it's like, after the things that were done over the course of the relationship, it's like, how can you even think that I would even entertain the thought of you even being a friend to me if you weren't even a decent partner to me and you treated me poorly and made me feel terrible about myself, or guilted me, or maybe you were reflecting your own insecurities or your own hidden agendas that you might have been sneaking around and cheating on me or something of that magnitude.
Yeah, I definitely tried to stay civil with my most recent ex just because I had become friends with folks that were like in his family, and so it was really hard for me to have to cut that tie, because once there's bad blood, at least for me, it's very hard for me to get over that bad blood. Mm-hmm. So within this particular circumstance, I really had to say, enough is enough. And this person went to the extent of like emailing me to share like their feelings with me, that I had moved on and all of these other things. And at that point, like, there's just no point where you can have a civil adult conversation, because that person obviously isn't over the situation, isn't over me, clearly can't cope with what's happening or take responsibility for their actions. And I just hate that if I do run into this person in the future, they've blown the opportunity for me to be civil, because Ron, as you know, I'm kind of intense, I think. Definitely, I share my feelings.
You put the in intense.
I do. And so for me, in that circumstance, like, I'll essentially give the silent treatment because I have nothing nice to say, so I won't say anything at all. But then I have other exes where, like, we're friends on Facebook, I've liked their wedding pictures, I've wished them well, like, we've been able to get over that hurdle. But I definitely have other exes that I would rather jump off a bridge than ever talk to them again.
Right. That's a little bit extreme, but I can understand the reasoning behind it. And with regards to how you mentioned, that ex that reached out to you, that I feel that's a lot to do with, like, their own issues trying to cope with it, and that as well as they are like looking for closure that I guess they didn't receive, even though you might have, painted it clear in the sky and neon lights flashing at their eyes that, it's over and these are the reasons, and maybe they just don't want to let go for some reason or not, whether it's the fear of the unknown or not wanting to be alone or just not wanting to see you happy and successful and flourishing in another relationship that's much healthier, proactive, you're communicating effectively, and, everything is, all joy and bliss and rainbows and sunshines.
Yeah, and I think the other piece to look at is if you do talk to an ex, there's then that possibility that you could potentially get back together. And for me, it's never been successful to get back with an ex. So I wanted to know what your thoughts on getting back with an ex are.
My thoughts about getting back with an ex, it kind of is in the wording itself, ex. I feel that it symbolizes exit. They left your life. They're out. They're kaput. They are in the rear view mirror of your car. Like, they are in your past. They should stay in that tense, not present or future, but past. That's just me. It never works. Or, it gets into that area where it's like, are we friends with benefits? Are we together? Are we exclusively dating? Are we dating and dating others? Are we polyamorous? And then it just gets really messy, and then I feel it gets lost in, you just are starting to question, like, what are we doing here to begin with? Like, there is reasons why we parted ways, whether it was on good terms or not. So I just feel personally, more times than not, it's not going to work out, or you're always going to like question, like, oh, well, if they left the person they were with to come back with me, what's to say they wouldn't do the same thing to me as well?
I agree, and it's interesting that you brought up the friend with benefits thing. You should never, ever be friends with benefits with an ex. You are literally setting yourself up for emotional turmoil. Like, you're either in or you're out, and I feel like being friends with benefits with an ex is literally setting yourself up for disaster.
Right.
Because at that point, they clearly didn't want you for your like emotionalness or to like have that being. They just wanted to have sex with you. So it's like, why would you stay with them? To me, that's just so, like, I'm guilty of doing it in the past, and it is the worst idea ever.
It's basically you're giving someone say a promotional thing, you're giving away something for free, and then they don't need to have the title attached to it. It's like, why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free?
Exactly. And then you don't know who else they're sleeping with.
And then that gets really tricky, and then, things start coming up, whether it's, the blame of, giving someone a sexually transmitted infection now, because it used to be disease, but I heard that now it's STIs. So
it is.
It's just, why would you want to subject yourself to that? Like, you're so much better than, stooping back to old habits, and there's a reason why they're not in your life, so why not keep it that way and move on? Obviously, you guys severed the ties, so why can't you just progress? And, there's always lesson learned through these experiences when you are dating and seeing people and stuff like that. And I just feel, you owe it to yourself to explore and, try to find the quote-unquote one. Sometimes it takes a lot longer and you got to be a little patient. Some people are hung up that they'll never find true love. And then there's the other extreme that I wanted to touch base on from what you said previously, with, regards to your exes wanting to get back and reconnect. Like, sometimes it goes to the other end of the extreme, that they almost corner you and guilt you into staying with them because they'll be, suicidal. And I think that's just really unhealthy. And, that's just going to lead to a tailspin of chaos and emotions. And then it's like, then if you feel so responsible, like the blood is on your hands if something, God forbid, was to happen to that other person, that it's on you. You were with them, like, you saw the red flags, but ignored them just to be with that person, whether it was to protect them or to protect yourself or both. It gets really messy when it comes to that.
Yeah, my most recent ex really struggled with mental health issues, and I definitely felt like his health and mental health were my responsibility, which then made me not take care of myself, like physically, mentally, emotionally. And so by being friends with him, I allowed him to almost use me as his pseudo therapist. And when I was ready to move on, and when I was ready to invest in myself as a person and do what I needed to do, I almost felt like I had this ball and chain because we had gone back and forth for a year and a half, and because I knew a lot of the things that he had not opened up to other people about. I felt like this responsibility. And then when we were finally done and over with, and we hadn't talked, and, obviously I moved on with my life and started to be happy, he almost started this, like, tailspin of, like, oh, woe is me. And, like, during, like, this email exchange we had, I essentially felt like, what was the purpose of bringing this up when you had a year and a half to fix what we were trying to build and what I was trying to repair? And in that moment, like, I just cut off the email exchange because I'm not responsible for someone else's mental health. I'm not responsible for somebody else's pain when I didn't do anything in that specific scenario to cause it. It was self-inflicted because he was unwilling willing to change and do what he needed to do to be the best version of himself. And so I always find it really interesting when you get involved in these really toxic relationships where people do threaten to hurt themselves or to hurt you or somebody else. And it's almost like this cycle, well, it is a cycle of abuse where they just pull you back in over and over and over again. So I definitely learned my lesson the hard way this past spring, that you can't be friends with an ex, especially one like that. I've definitely been friends with people who still had feelings for me, and we had like kind of dated, like, hate to say it, like we were friends and we might have done some other things, but we never officially dated. And when I've moved on and then been in a relationship, they wanted to keep that friendship without the physicality. And I didn't know that they had feelings for me because we never really had that discussion. So that's like a whole new layer that's like, hey, well, we were friends and, you know, we shared some intimacy, but I never saw you as a romantic partner. That's where that friends with benefits confusion comes in. And then when you get into a new relationship, you're like, oh, well, I was friends with so-and-so. And then your current partner's like, yeah, you were more than friends, and I'm not really comfortable with you continuing to talk to them. That, I think, is an added layer of A, confusion, and B, wanting to make sure that your partner is going to trust you if you have friends that you have at some point shared some kind of physical connection with.
Right. So for the listeners out there, I think it's safe to say, case closed. You can't be friends with an ex. If you feel different about this or have a story of your own, please leave a comment and, you know, reach out to me. I would love to hear about it. Or if you want to have your own segment on this podcast, that'd be awesome. And yeah, I agree with a lot of points you made tonight, and it's been refreshing to hear another point of view, a female point of view from it, because I know the male is obviously different and we think differently. And thank you so much for being a part of my podcast. And as always, let us make a connection after a deep reflection. Thank you and good night.